Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's wonderful to be back in sunny Donegal. I used to come here very frequently when I was youth hosteling. You can tell by the white to grey hair that was in the Jurassic period. But it's great to be back here, and especially to be back with Tommy, who, though we were in professions which very often can be in conflict, I have to say that Tommy and I have never been in conflict, no doubt helped by the fact that we both support the greatest Premier League team, Tottenham Hotspur. The subject title that I had for this evening is From Now On. I'll come back to the reason for that title later on in my remarks. But what I want to do essentially is to talk about the, I suppose, set of relationships post-Brexit and the impact that Brexit will have on those relationships. For over a year, there has been a passionate debate with some players running around as if their hair was on fire, advancing at times preposterous claims about the possible outcomes of Britain's exit from the European Union. The claims are being ratcheted exponentially as we approach the deadline for a deal to be concluded. Now, there's little that I can helpfully add to a dialogue upon which I think everything that could be said has been, and lots that shouldn't have been said has been disgorged as well. So there certainly is little new and nothing beneficial that I can offer on the substance and nature of the deal itself. The issues of whether we have a hard Brexit, a soft Brexit, or a medium rare Brexit will be settled one way or the other, helpfully or not, and as those most closely engaged in the negotiations don't know themselves, I think only time will reveal its final shape. So I want to set those issues to one side for the purpose of my remarks and consider the equally significant questions. What will the consequences be, and what then? In doing so, I'm not crystal ball gazing about the tangible business or economic implications, but rather the potential relationship repercussions. No matter how one views Brexit, it has been disruptive, distracting, and let's face it, wearisome. It could not have been otherwise. For a sustained period, there has been a settled understanding of the constitutional position of Northern Ireland and its interaction with both the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. Shaking that tree was almost certain to cause abundant fallout. So whatever happens over the next weeks and months, the stable connections that developed over the past 2 decades will unalterably change. We are at the cusp of a new era, an era in which the Republic of Ireland is firmly locked into a union as part of the EU, while Northern Ireland is firmly locked into a distinct and separate union as part of the UK. Yes, the last page of a transformative chapter in our history is being turned. And whether we look back longingly or with displeasure, we're still moving on and in different directions. There will be an outcome to the present negotiations, and we will all have to live with it. So let's look at the governmental East-West relationship. When I approach the issue of post-Brexit ties, I first have to draw attention to the reality. It often gets missed in the relentless drama about borders and whether the United Kingdom is about to grasp a great economic opportunity or face a crushing economic disaster. For the EU, in addition to being an economic union for the UK and the Irish Republic, has been a common room where allies discussed common interests, and almost always pursued common causes. Firstly, there has been the frequency of contacts. Membership of the same club brings representatives of the two governments together routinely and regularly. Such natural and habitual contact provides opportunities and, for the most part, creates a sense of friendship and conviviality. Secondly, there is the comradeship of being part of the same team. Distance and detachment will inevitably cool the kinship. There is no question that the two governments will continue to claim everlasting friendship and affection, complete with copious commitments to maintaining their unique bond. But any lucid thinker will realize that the more remote the new relationship becomes, the more it will involve a greater level of competition, which will cause the gap to grow. Thirdly, as full and cooperating members of the EU, there has been a significant oneness in the approach of both countries and a shared outlook when dealing with policies, problems, and events. However, in a post-Brexit scenario, there will be much more competition, greater protection of the separate national interests, and more room for independent actions accompanied by the clashes and struggles that accompany such rivalry, as will from time to time undoubtedly occur. It's easy to imagine circumstances in the future where the Republic takes up cudgels alongside the other EU states, which are hostile to the United Kingdom's interests. It's just as easy to envisage the impact that the resultant resentment will have on the ties between the two nations, particularly if a pattern of opposition develops. Some politicians and others, recognizing the loss of this catalytic factor, argue that the two governments will be able to set up their own meeting structures. Of course they can and will, as indeed has been suggested only this week. But they will never replicate the routine, regular and relaxed retreat or European hangout that has provided countless opportunities for contact and conversations in the margins of meetings and events over many years. My own knowledge of such contacts before or after the formal, stuffy, often scripted summits tells me that they are much more valuable than the official meeting exchanges. In summary, no matter how it is approached, at best, the United Kingdom and Ireland will struggle to maintain anything close to the warmth of their pre-Brexit affinity. At worst, that relationship may become stony and staid, and in extreme circumstances, even perfunctory and fruitless. I already detect from behind the scenes on the UK side that what they judge as the rigid, if not aggressive, negotiating posture adopted by Irish government ministers has planted the seeds of regression in that association. Now, don't just be fooled by the diplomatic, understated Whitehall speak. They are not happy with Dublin. And I can be absolutely certain that Dublin isn't happy with London. So I believe the impact of recent months should serve as a timely and cautionary example of how even stable, strong, and special ties loosen when interests diverge and politicians cross swords on the battlefield. Admittedly, I come from a unionist, pro-UK angle of vision, but the truth stands no matter from whatever viewpoint that you arrived here. And if I am right, to whatever degree, there is a lesson for people north and south to learn. The harmonious and cordial coexistence between the two traditions on this island, upon which I would suggest peace and stability depends, cannot in the future be reliant or dependent on the safety net of the 1 in a million possibility of a genial Brexit outcome that maintains British-Irish relations at pre-Brexit levels. Until now, the role of the government has been to troubleshoot the Northern Ireland settlement. It may not be productive to rely on them fulfilling that role in the future. In short, we must be able to work out for ourselves the way we function in a post-Brexit era, while maintaining the important balance in both Northern Ireland's east-west and its north-south axis. Then I move to consider the impact on north-south relationships. I first feel compelled to say that those who seek to manipulate the UK's exiting process to shift the balance, either by working towards a backup option that separates Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK, or by pressing for a hard border that cuts off north-south interaction, clearly do not understand the importance of maintaining the balance which has led pre-Brexit to Northern Ireland having its best ever rapport with the South and indeed internally. More than that, they are playing a dangerous stratagem, one that could destabilise Northern Ireland for years to come. The network of arrangements, north-south, east-west, and within Northern Ireland itself, have developed over a number of years and involved much give and take and hard work in getting the balance right. The arrangements have allowed unionists and nationalists to participate fully within a framework of relationships and to do so in a relaxed manner with mutually beneficial outcomes. It worked, and moreover, no one felt threatened by it. But it is a carefully and finely tuned instrument, and events that disturb the balance will require measures to be taken to maintain the equilibrium. Correspondingly, efforts to tip the balance one way or the other must be resisted. I cannot properly analyse this aspect of the subject without first stating the obvious. There will be at least two views of how North-South arrangements should develop in a post-Brexit situation. But I suspect that there will be few differences when considering how divisive the handling of the Brexit process has been to the necessary partnership between the two main sections of the Northern Ireland community. Now, it would be absurd for me to proffer a nationalist outlook on the potential impact of Brexit on North-South relations. However, as an interested observer, I have to conclude that in tandem with their unionist counterparts, the understandable focus on the immediate political arrangements, the practical business and economic arrangements, has consumed more of their thinking, and to the extent that it has been considered at all, it has been in the context of loading the outcome of a Brexit deal to safeguard or advantage wider constitutional matters. From a unionist perspective, it need only be stated to be accepted that there has been a rapid deterioration in their estimation of the Irish government. Unionists believe Dublin has been self-serving and unnecessarily bellicose during the process. I believe the absence of a working North-South institution has exacerbated that situation. It would be a unionist viewpoint that the Republic's government showed little interest and took no account of how they felt about any of the proposed Brexit solutions, and still less about the impact of those proposals on future relationships. Moreover, there is a feeling that at no point has there been any consideration to the effect and force of their words and actions upon the unionist population. If at the end of negotiations there is a potential of UK and ROI relationships cooling and a worsening in unionist relationships with Dublin, the spillover consequences on relationships within Northern Ireland are clear and alarming. fewer common causes and shared interests, along with greater competition, are likely post-Brexit. Poaching, or indeed even the appearance of poaching jobs and investment across the border in either direction, or indeed Dublin taking any decision in the EU which would have a detrimental impact on Northern Ireland, will add bile to the mix. It's not a pretty picture and not a positive vision for the future. So let's move on and focus on the inter-community relationships in Northern Ireland. Although it is not something that people have talked about much, there will be major implications within Northern Ireland, not only for political, but also for community concord in the post-Brexit age. But Unionists and Nationalists have very different observations about the Brexit process. Nationalists feel that the UK government has ignored the majority view in Northern Ireland expressed in the referendum. I will try to disguise my amusement at who now dons the mantle of the new majority rule advocates, but they fear that the separation from those with whom they identify in the South is now in danger, and they are alarmed at the prospect of barriers, hard borders, and a new, more austere dispensation. Unionists fear any deal that results in them being prized away from Great Britain and by treaty or by regulation stapled to the Irish Republic. And both nationalist and unionist fears are genuinely held, and in truth, they are both notionally possible outcomes. The fact that nationalists have been repeatedly assured by everyone involved that there will be no physical infrastructure or hard border on the island, or the fact that unionists have been assured in Parliament and in other places, and now in legislation, that there will be no sea border, it still hasn't removed the fears. Unquestionably, the parties and traditions in Northern Ireland have become more polarised as a result of the Brexit hysteria. Much of it was avoidable, but an absence of the political cohesion that a functioning executive and assembly would have provided in the past has intensified that division. Once again, that division is along traditional lines. The entirety, I think, of the nationalist community would seem to still hold out the hope that some route can be found to reverse what they see as an unacceptable referendum outcome. On the unionist side, the sliver of unionists who voted to remain in the EU have accepted the referendum result and now have moved back towards the mainstream unionist position. Looking forward, it doesn't augur well, as parties in opposition are even less measured in the presentation of their case. Each tradition will almost certainly echo the position of the government with which they are most closely identified, and without the task of governing themselves and the responsibilities that accompany being in government, a blame game and justification philosophy will prevail. There is, of course, a fourth relationship that often gets missed, and that is the internal UK relationship. Of course, the Secretary of State will be on hand to meet as regularly as is needed any of the Northern Ireland parties and representatives. But with no SDLP members at Westminster and Sinn Féin boycotting the House of Commons, nationalist contacts will be infrequent with British politicians. This is not because of Brexit, of course, but in the absence of an executive, the British-Irish Ministerial Council or the intergovernmental conference meetings don't take place, which would have contributed to having more contacts between Northern Ireland politicians and British politicians. So what should be done about it? I know in what I have postulated, I may have accentuated the negative just to hit home how difficult things might become But if you accept my conclusions to any degree, then you must accept that things will never be the same again. Yet in the context of the totality of relationships, it need not ipso facto mean that the trend is unalterable or that we need to dip so low. Central to protecting the helpful and cordial set of relationships that have been built up over many years, in my view, is the rebirth and smooth operation of the Northern Ireland Assembly, its executive, along with the north-south and east-west institutions. Without each and all of those parts being in place and working, relationships will suffer, perhaps drastically. The absence of the complete network of connections leaves us all vulnerable to a downward spiral that may lead to toxicity. I must say this before someone throws the accusation at me. Yes, I do want those arrangements to return anyway, but I'm not shaping my discourse around post-Brexit relationships to apply leverage in order to achieve what has been my prevailing objectives. The potential, I would say, likely damage to relationships is simply one more sound reason why politicians need to be exercised about resolving the present impasse in Northern Ireland. Think of it. If the institutions are all operational, there will be regular contact, there will be the promotion of common causes, the pursuit of mutual interests, and the best opportunities to strengthen the bond that should exist between and among good neighbours. I accept that without this setup, it is still feasible to arrange meetings from time to time at which the key players can gather. But that's not the same as working closely together and in harness consistently and frequently for a worthy purpose. It remains my strong and settled opinion that the deadlock in Northern Ireland must be broken. People are literally suffering the loss, or at least a reduction, of services and standards. Important decisions, literally thousands of important decisions, lie awaiting ministerial sign-off. It is intolerable that there are politicians who appear to have turned their back on the will and needs of the community that they were elected to serve. It doesn't matter which section of the community that I talk to. The views are almost identical. The message is clear. The public believe that the consequences of not having a functioning assembly, the impact on our health service, our education system, the infrastructure projects that need to be started, the needs of those who have suffered institutional abuse and are awaiting action, those who need ministers to be searching for jobs and investment to get the country buzzing again, and the countless other priorities are far more urgent and of greater importance than any of the given reasons for refusing to operate the Assembly. It would, of course, be best if a resolution could first be found to the concerns that parties have set out. That would be my preference. But if it is not immediately available, then at least accept that no one's position is weakened if parties were to return to Stormont while outstanding issues are resolved in parallel under a strictly timetabled schedule. Excuses that result in doing nothing really do not cut the delf. There is no more important task for Assembly members to perform than working to restore the institutions. We have 18 months of reasons to show that sitting outside the Assembly hasn't solved the outstanding differences. There are strong reasons to believe that sitting in the Assembly together, looking at the problems that exist and need to be resolved, which would be tied to a set of strict deadlines that would trigger the removal of the Assembly unless they are met, I believe would produce better outcomes. What it needs is an injection of urgency to get the process moving. And finally, if you are in any way plugged in to what is known as modern pop culture, you'll know that the title that I chose for my paper, From Now On, comes straight out of the songbook of that superb musical movie, The Great Showman. It's a song that is sung by Hugh Jackman. It speaks about him picking himself up from the rubble of his life and saying what was really important. He makes a commitment which I only wish our politicians would echo. It says, from now on, what's waited till tomorrow starts tonight. Now, my attention is not to liken recent political happenings to Barnum's circus, though no doubt there are those who, given half a chance, would happily make a fist of arguing that case. But for those who know the Barnum movie Lifestone, I would suggest there is a more acceptable analogy. Over the past generation, we have, bit by bit, created a unique construct, bringing together diverse traditions and distinctive cultures. We knew that it was untried, novel, and a risk. It faced both opposition and difficulties, but it also gave more than a glimpse of its potential. Now it has collapsed, and its future depends on whether those who were part of it cherish what has been lost and have the drive and commitment to build it back up again. It also relies on the ongoing support of the public. I contend that the revival of the Assembly and Executive is an imperative in a post-Brexit era. It represents our best hope of peace, stability, and reconciliation. When I watch the chronicles of P.T. Barnum and his struggle, I can only hope that we have as happy an ending as the movie. I know the Assembly has had its detractors, but though the road was bumpy at times, it proved that politicians from very different backgrounds and with very different views could work together and do so to the benefit of the whole community. It is now facing a massive test, but I have seen nobody come forward with a better plan for Northern Ireland than the one we operated successfully for over a decade, one that was capable of attracting the support of both sections of our community. It was worth the risks and hardships to put those arrangements in place. I contend that it is still worth fighting to see them return. Thank you.